There are a lot of discussions that go around the community about what languages beginners should start learning initially, what languages benefit you in the long run, what languages are the easiest to learn. There is never a concise answer to this, but I wanted to just talk about my experience, and I'm also going to provide some What the, am I having a stroke? I'm going to be using some statistics. But I'm going to be using some I'm going to use some stats. But I'm going to be using some data that I collected from Stack Overflow to demonstrate my points and to discuss a variety of languages. And based off of that, I think I could point people in the right direction. This is always a very tedious subject. It's really hard to decide what you want to commit and learn to for the next little while. And even institutions struggle with this. For example, at my university right now, when I was in first year, we were learning Java as our first class, but students struggle with it, and it was difficult to teach students from scratch. Lots of institutions in Canada use Python as the initial language. That's because it definitely is a lot easier to use. The syntax is definitely easier to understand. The syntax is definitely similar to the English language, and it only becomes more complicated as you start importing more libraries, diving more into fields like data sciences. However, Python definitely is one of the largest growing languages as of right now. That's because of the booming machine learning industry, all those fluff words that uses Python and R. So machine learning, TensorFlow, just taking in data sets and analyzing it, that requires Python. And off the bat, if you learn Python, I think you have a pretty good safety net in terms of knowledge and experience. And if we look at Python on Stack Overflow, you can see Python has also surpassed C# and PHP in the past 2 years, and it's growing to become one of the largest and most popular languages in the world. So I think having that on your resume is definitely a nice notch on your belt. If you end up going through Python lectures and videos and you end up enjoying it more, then diving into the data sciences field is something I definitely recommend. From my experience, I've done some machine learning and it definitely is fun. There are a lot of packages on Udemy. There are a lot of courses that you can purchase online, and I'll post some links down below. Now, aside from Python, I wanted to discuss other languages. For me personally, it was always important that the languages I learned would carry throughout my career. So when I learn a language, the syntax or the libraries or the logic behind the language would carry through to the next language I learn. And that's where it gets a bit more difficult. That's why the community struggles, because they can't always provide the ideal language, which is not only beneficial for your career, but also relates to a lot of other fields. So Stack Overflow actually provides very nice graphics and lets us see what languages carry on their knowledge to other programs. So if you look over here, we have this entire graphic, and everything here kind of shows how they're related. So if you look over here, we have Python. If you learn Python, as I said before, you gain access to a larger library, you get to work more with data sciences, and that's where TensorFlow comes in, PyCharm. Obviously, Linux is a huge part of Python. And through all this, you get to learn a pretty booming field. And I think that's a great trade-off. However, the downside to this is that you don't really gain much out of Python in other areas. So all these areas, they're not related to Python. The reason why I recommend Python as your initial language is because the syntax is just arguably easier to use. It's easier to work through, it's easier to understand. And I think this is a great way to kind of understand and gauge how interested and how passionate you are about the programming field. This allows you to measure and quantify your skill. I learned Swift, and then I started to learn more Objective-C. Through Objective-C, I started to do more Python, and I kind of hopped all over the place. I didn't really pick a language, stick to it, and then build off of that. So from my experience, I would recommend focusing on this area. So JavaScript for the past 6 years has been the #1 most requested, most demanded, and most learned language according to Stack Overflow. JavaScript is one of the most powerful tools you could learn. It definitely is much more tedious than Python, but if you want to slowly transition into JavaScript, what I definitely would recommend is to start with HTML. It's a language used for front-end and client-side development. What I like about it is that it's easy to learn off the bat. You can easily build your own projects. And what I've noticed from developers or people trying to learn development is that they have very little patience. They want to see their code come to life. They want something to interact and play with. And HTML, not only does it render instantly, it's easy to use. You can then transfer your knowledge to CSS, then to PHP, and then using these three languages, you could build a pretty decent website. Through this, you can build a server side using PHP and then use SQL for databasing, which I definitely recommend. And the fact that these languages all contribute towards building one large project, that personally motivates me a lot more because then I get to learn how to build a fully working project. For me, that was always very important. I was very impatient when I first learned programming, and that's why I liked Swift and Xcode, because I got to instantly see an application appear. Once you learn HTML and CSS, JavaScript is definitely much more tedious, but you can do so much with JavaScript. If you learn JavaScript, you will be able to easily catch on to React, and then Node, and then Angular. So Angular is for front end, same with React, same with React Native. You can use React Native for mobile development, and you can develop on a variety of platforms from websites to mobile. And as I said before, I was hopping onto different languages in different areas, and at the end of the day, I learned what I had to learn. But if I could do it again, I would definitely learn from HTML, then CSS, SQL, PHP, and then start developing with JavaScript. And they all contribute to each other. It definitely is one of my favorite languages as of right now. Now, with that said, there are ways you can stack your knowledge and treat each language as a prerequisite for other languages. And this is just a smart way to use your knowledge. At the end of the day, you can't just fast forward through various languages. It always takes time. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.